Well, today is Tuesday, and we're talking about the Bible study, and I'm so excited. It is so good to come on and talk about the Bible, and people say how things are different and the way we think and the way we act and what we do and stuff like that. And on today, I'm still talking about the unwelcome guests. When I think about Luke chapter 14, I think about started all started when Jesus was invited to the Pharisees invited Jesus to a place to set him up because it was their custom to come out to eat on the Sabbath. And I had a question. I said, which day is the Sabbath? Because we celebrate the Sabbath so much. We always celebrate on Sunday. Who changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday? And why is that so important at a time like this? Well, when we look at Luke chapter 14, we have to go back to the beginning. Because in the beginning, it says, and it came to pass as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day, which at that time it was Saturday, that they watched him, and behold, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsies. Now let's look at that in verse number 2, when he's talking about the dropsies. What are the dropsies? That's a disease for the heart disease. That's a disease like kidney trouble, heart ailment, or liver disease, the dropsies. You know, those are the type of people that you're not supposed to invite to the meal because it was against their religion, because he wasn't considered unclean. Then in verse number 3 it says, and Jesus answered spake unto the lawyers and the Pharisees, saying, It is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Well, here we found that the Sabbath day, um, hospitality was an important part of the Jewish life. So it wasn't unusual for them to invite Jesus. But Jesus knew their heart, but they didn't know Jesus. They was looking at Jesus, who is Jesus' mom? They ain't nobody but the carpenter's son. Who is Jesus' mom? What did Jesus do? What did Jesus say? I mean, who is his daddy? Joseph. I mean, he ain't nobody. But what they forgot to realize is that Jesus is the one that knew their thought from afar off. Jesus was the one that was healing the sick, raising the dead. Jesus did that. So they invite him to the table. Have you ever been invited to the table with your enemies? So they were enemies of Jesus. Jesus wasn't enemies of them, but they invite him to the table. And when they invite him to the table, they invite the man that was sick with the dropsies as well. And then when they got him there, they tried to trip him up. But Jesus, being all that he was, he came and punched him in the throat. I'm like, oh, Jesus, you tough. Because here they are, and they invite him to eat, and their conversation was, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Because you remember the Pharisees are the one that believe we can heal, like if the animals get sick, let's take care of the animals because that's an important guest. Let's take care of animals. And Jesus was saying, so you telling me, Pharisees, you telling me that those animals are better than people? But Jesus being cool and calm, sitting at the table, because one thing that your enemy do, this is what your enemy do, they set you up. They set you up. Enemies. They may invite you to dinner. They're going to watch you. They're going to watch your body language. They're going to watch what you say. They're going to watch what you do with your hair. And how many times you think you're on program and all you coming just to eat. Yeah, they're going to have the table fit for you. But yet still they want some information. And here we find out that there were five kind of men that was at that table. Okay? And they held their peace. And he took him and healed him and let him go and answered them, saying, which one of you shall have an ass or an ox and to fall into the pit and will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath day? So what happened here? So we find out that Jesus says, we have five men at this table. And let me label them for you. Number one, the one man was the Pharisees. Pharisees, which was the false pity. False pity on who? Oh, I have pity on this man. He's so sick. But he did not. But Jesus already knew they was trying to set him up. So when you go out to eat at somebody's table, you gotta remember you're trying to set up. You gotta already know if people are inviting you out to eat and they'll invite you to eat. You gotta see, am I really welcome at this table? Do they want some information from me? You know, they say I'm a welcome guest, but really I'm an unwelcome guest because they want some information from me. So the first one in verse 14, 1 through 6, it was the false pity, the Pharisees. The second man was the false popularity. That was one of the guests. And that is in Luke 14, 7 through 11. The third was the false hospitality. And that was the host. You know, I'm treating you good, but I just want your information. And the fourth one was the Jew, which was false security. The five kind of men that was out there. But I just named you four because the fifth will go in tomorrow. And I'm just piggyback on yesterday about when I was talking about when someone invites you in. And then Jesus went on when we got down to verse number 7, when he was saying, verse number 7 says, and he put forth parables to those which were bedded. When he marked how they chose out the chief room, saying unto them, when thou art bidden of any man at a wedding, sit not in the highest room, less and more humble. And I talked about that being more humble yesterday. And what he was saying was, um, God wasn't, our Jesus, he wasn't there to impress nobody. They already knew that once they invited him in, that he was going to heal that man. And they knew it was unlawful because by that law that Jesus couldn't heal. But Jesus is a man of compassion. So he did what he had to do. And we found that out in verse number 1. So y'all call an unwelcome guest to this table. Because you know it's not right to call somebody to the table that is crippled unless you're trying to help them out. But you knew in your heart, you Pharisees, you knew in your heart that I would heal this man. And today is Sabbath, and I know the law. I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. And I learned those laws. Jesus has said, I know those laws. I'm going to heal this man because that's who I am. I'm going to send him on his way. And we won't get to sit at the table to eat with y'all because y'all trying to kill him. And I ain't going to let you kill him. I'm not going to let you kill his spirit because you want to take him out. But I'm not going to let you. So, I'm the invited guest. That was a guest that y'all used to try to trap me up. That was the unwelcome guest. But I changed that strategy for you real quick and made him welcome because I healed that sick man on the Sabbath day. Now that I've healed the sick man, now I'm going to put y'all all on mute. So let me tell you about my Jesus. Jesus got an attitude. Yes, he did. Like, Jesus, for real? Are you serious? Yeah, Jesus got an attitude. So as we go on, it says, God is not impressed by our status in society or in the church. He is not influenced by what people say or think about us. He's not. Because he sees the thoughts, the motives of the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. God still humbles the proud and exalts the humble people. You have to be humble. God still humbles the proud and exalts the humble. And so that's when we get into this, when we get into taking what seat to take. Because people always in society say that if you have all these credentials, you can sit high. And if you don't have these credentials, you can sit low. And I'm so glad that we have a Jesus to say, baby, when you sit in a low position, I'm going to exalt you to the high position. Because one thing, while you in that low position, you begin to work that position. And you making the person in the high position look good. And guess what? It's always going to be a transfer somewhere. And when that person is ready to transfer, you've already worked your position. You've already taken the low road in your position. Now let's look at number 3. Let's look at the false hospitality. And this will be Luke 14:12-14. Jesus knew that the host had invited his guests for 2 reasons. The first reason was to pay them back because they had invited him to the past feast. you know, so you don't accept every invitation. Look what Jesus. Okay. I know what y'all doing to me. I wasn't ready then, but I done studied you jokers long enough. And let me tell you, y'all, I'm gonna put y'all on mute. That's Jesus. You gonna get put on mute. So here we go. And number 2, to put them under the death so that they would invite him to a future feast. Such hospitality was not an expression of love and grace, but rather of evidence of pride and selfishness. Jesus knew that there was the pride and self. He knew it. He knew it. How many times have you had somebody to invite you out to eat and you know they don't like you? Thank you guys. You know they don't like you. Oh, okay. But don't worry. If you got Jesus in your heart, you can go. You can go. You can go. You can go to the meeting. Go to the meeting. Be yourself. Go to the meeting. Do what you got to do. Stay there for a minute. Sit at the table. Don't leave your water. Cause if you got some water, you may want to drink it. And when you walk away to go get some more food, you may not want to go back to that water. It may slip something in it. But let me tell you, when you sit at an unwelcome table and you're the unwelcome guest, but they have it like Luke 14:12-14, where the host was false hospitality. Jesus sat at that table because although they still classified him as Mary's little boy, he ain't got no degree. He ain't got this. He don't work here. He don't do this. He don't own this. He don't own that. That's just he just always break the law. But Jesus said, I'm going. And I'm going and I'm taking my Father with me, the good spirit. Because I know in Luke chapter 2, verse 52, because my God is with me and he prepared this table for me to sit at today. I can sit at an unwelcome table with y'all jokers. And then it says, it warns, Jesus does not prohibit us from entertaining family and friends, but he warns us against entertaining only your family and friends exclusively. That kind of fellowship quickly degrades into a mutual admiration in society in which each one tries to outdo the other. Who want to outdo somebody? Nobody want to outdo nobody. We think our main motive when we share a meal and we come together, our main motives for sharing must be to praise our God and not to applaud men. We have to learn how, like in Luke chapter 14, verse number, I'm going to read this verse number 10. Number 10 says, but when thou art bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room. Take the low road. And then go back to number 12, and it says, then said he also to him that bade him, when thou makest a dinner or a supper, call not thy friends. Don't just call your friends. And I just told you about that. And this is where he's talking about the false hospitality. Say, don't just call your friends. Don't, my friends, let me come over. It says, but call not thy friends, nor thy brothers, nor thy kinsmen, nor thy rich neighbor, lest they also be at thee again, and replicants thee. But the unwelcome guest, let's get to it. I know you've been waiting. The unwelcome guest, where'd you get that from? Well, it's right here in the Bible when Jesus tells us what to do. He said, don't just hang out with everybody that's familiar. Go get somebody that ain't nobody thinking about hanging out with. That maybe don't have a meal. Jesus said in verse number 13, he says, but when thou makest a feast, when you make it a meal on your Sabbath. I don't know about y'all, but y'all remember when back in the day, this is so old back in the day. Back in the day when we used to have to cook on Saturdays. And when we get out of church on Sundays, because we stayed there all day and all night, we could come home and we could actually sit there and have a home cooked meal. We could do that. We was fellowshipping with one another, and everybody in our community that looks like us, played like us. We had our little, but it didn't matter. But we still stuck together. And Jesus said, verse Luke chapter 14, verse number 13, he says, but when thou makest a feast, call the poor, the blind, the lame, the blind. Now, I don't know. I ain't got to that point yet. How many of us, when we have a meal, we look outside our circles to go pull somebody in that is poor, that is lame, that is blind, and thou shalt be blessed. Okay, we want to get blessed, but let's see how we get blessed. The unwelcome guest. The unwelcome guest is the poor. The unwelcome guest is the lame. The unwelcome guest is the blind. Well, I don't see nobody that I know in my circle that would go out and say, hey, you blind? You want to come sit at the table with me? But Jesus said when we're going to have a meal, that's who we need to bring to our table. I'm just saying, this is what the Bible, we read it every day. But do we apply it? We have our big meals. Yeah, I can say that. Yeah, we have a big meal. But it says, this is the kicker in verse number 14. And thou shalt be blessed. And then it said, what are you going to be blessed for? It says, you're going to be blessed for they cannot recompense thee, for thou shalt be recompensated. In other words, you're going to be recompensated for it because they can't pay for it, but you can. And I'm going to make sure you have the money to pay for what you lost. Let me tell you, when you going to pay for it now? At the resurrections of the just. Oh, I thought I was going to get it right here. I thought if I do all this, I'm gonna get the big car. I'm gonna become famous on television. I'm gonna be, because if you start taking the low road and you're helping people in high position, it's gonna fall down to you. It's gonna fall down to you. Get out of our comfort zone and let's move around and do something different. And then it says, our motive for sharing must be praise of God. And then chapter 61, Matthew chapter 6, verse 1 and 8, it says that's what I'm motive for. It says, not the applause of man, the eternal reward in heaven, and not the temporary recognition on earth. A, a pastor friend of mine used to remind me, you can't get your reward twice. And he was right. Matthew 6, 1 through 8. I just want you to know that the unwelcome guests, the unwelcome guests. And then I'm going to go back to Luke 14. The verses are 7 to 15. And my question to you was, who are the welcome guests? Who are the welcome guests? And who are the unwelcome guests? In this passage, it was Jesus. He was the welcome guest. But they brought in a man that was sick so that they could plot against the welcome guests. Okay? And who invited Jesus? It was the Pharisees, who also invited the, the dropsy men. What day is the Sabbath? Constantine made a decree that we should take the Sabbath from Saturday and put it on Sunday. But Constantine wasn't the one that changed that. Constantine was the man that he was a paganist. Constantine was a man that he he worshipped the sun god. But some people say it was the Roman emperor that did it. But when you keep reading and keep doing the history, you find out that in the Old Testament, Moses and Aaron them, that law was given to them. Now to help y'all out, while I get ready to go, to help y'all out. The Sabbath day, what is the Sabbath, which we celebrate on Sunday for? It's for us to have communion. That's for us to drink our little wine and our little cracker and fellowship. So yeah, we use that scripture all the time. Forsake not thyself to assemble together with believers, because that's where your strength comes from. But we have to know that we have to celebrate our Lord and our Savior on the first Sunday, the Sabbath day, the first Sunday, the New Testament, the first Sunday. And how is it that I get on here and I was gonna tell y'all what day it was, and I left my notes on my desk. That's just awful. But it was in Acts chapter 20. When you go back, you'll find out that the Sabbath is supposed to be for the first Sunday when you take communion at church, worship and praise God, and fellowship with your brothers and sisters. Yeah, I know I'm a little quiet and not a little radical. And one thing I want y'all to know that you don't have to be in a church just to have a Bible study. You can have a Bible study while you eat. You can have a Bible study in your car. You can wake up in the morning and just pick up. You can wake up this afternoon and start doing this. But what I want you to know is there's always going to be an unwelcome guest. How are you going to welcome them in? How are you going to treat people? What are you going to do? What are you going to say? Have you ever been somewhere and you felt unwelcome too? Well, think about it. You're not alone. Think about the people who feel like I'm not even good enough to come to church. Because I'm looking around. I carry the church with me every day. As long as I'm talking about the Most High, this is the church. That's a place to worship. That's a place where your brothers and sisters are supposed to strengthen you. But if they don't go, who's going to strengthen you? And when you go out, are they just there to talk about you? But the church, you are the church. You go there to fellowship and worship and take communion. That's what, because now, as Jamal has said, and I'm beginning to look around, now they're begging people to come to church, to the building. Can y'all come worship at the building? Well, the reason why we say now we just say, I need you to link up with me. I need you to give me a hug to say I'm okay. I need you to say, brother and sister, I love you and Jesus do too. Because we've been isolated long enough. Now we began to feel like we are the unwanted guests. Because who's hugging me today? I need to hug myself. But when I go to the church, to the worship temple, people are there to greet you and say, good morning, thank you. Thank you for showing up. That may be the only nice words you have. But the welcome guests, the unwelcome guests, you're your own unwelcome guest when you stay at home in that bedroom every day, Sunday morning. You're depriving that person who loved you so much and you would never know. And then you wonder when you get sick, what happened? Why they won't come visit me? Well, you isolated yourself. You separated. You broke the communion. I'm not trying to get y'all to go back into the building. I'm trying to get us to realize we put everybody as unwelcome. And a lot of things that we have been taught, we go back and research, we'll see that we are our own self problem. It tell us not to judge. It tell us how we can be blessed. And tell us when we're sitting at the table how to act. It tell us don't be too big a hurry to just run and get in positions. There's somebody out there today that's thinking about that big position right now. The thing is, count to three and wait. Just wait on it. You've been waiting this long, but be a faithful servant in your waiting position. Because remember, only what you do for Christ will last. I talked about the four the four kinds of men that were invited. And at this point, women was not invited to the sit and dine with a man. At this point, the woman is the unwelcome guest. She couldn't come and eat. It was the false pity, the Pharisees. St. Luke 14, 1 through 6. It was the false popularity, which was the guest. 14, Luke 14, 7, 1 through 11. The false hospitality, which was the host. St. Luke 14, 12 and 14. And number 4, the false Jew security. St. Luke 14, 15, and we'll pick that up on tomorrow. You got to remember, treat people the way you want to be treated. Do what you want to do. And you know what? The Pharisees, they were mad at Jesus because you got to remember that Jesus had already violated their Sabbath tradition at least 7 different times. And the first time was when he cast out the demon in Luke 4, 31 and 37. The second time when he healed the fever, Luke 4, 38. The third time was when he allowed the disciples to pluck a grain, Luke 6, 1 through 5. The next time was when he healed the lame man, John 5 and 1. The next when he healed a man who was paralyzed, had a paralyzed hand, Luke 6 and 6. And the sixth time is when he delivered a crippled woman who was afflicted by a demon. And the last time was when he healed a man that was blind. All those was considered unwelcome gift, the unwelcome guests. But guess what? Jesus went to the table, sit at the table, and put them all on mute and crashed the party. I bet they were saying, Jesus, you can go home now. You done too much. And with that being said, answer the questions. Keep studying. And if you want to come on with me, let me know. Have a great day. Thanks.